This is Agenda Awani with me, Naila Huda. And as the ASEAN Summit returns to Kuala Lumpur, all eyes are on Malaysia, not just as the host, but as chair of ASEAN at a time when the region is facing serious geopolitical shifts, with global tensions flaring, tariffs from Washington, and deepening influence from China. We may just be looking at ASEAN walking an impossible tightrope, trying to stay neutral, relevant, and united all at the same time. So on Agenda Awani tonight, we want to have a closer look at what we can expect from the ASEAN Summit next week. And to help us unpack and explain some of these questions, we have Dr. Julia Rognifart from Taylor's University, Senior Lecturer of the School of Law and Governance at Taylor's University. Thank you so much, Dr. Julia, for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Dr. Julia, I think we want to start off with the bigger picture, I guess, to just have a general idea of what we can look out for at the ASEAN Summit in Kuala Lumpur this year and next week, with Malaysia taking the lead as chair. What do you think we should look out for?
Well, under Malaysia's chairmanship, especially, I think the ASEAN Summit is expected to, as we've heard, to emphasize on unity, economic resilience, regional stability, and all of this is taking place amidst the rising global uncertainties that ASEAN members have to grapple with. And also on the agenda, there is we have digital economy, cooperation stated, green transition strategies, and trade connectivity, issues of developing infrastructure, and especially the efforts to develop the ASEAN Digital Economy Framework Agreement. Malaysia also is likely to drive discussion on geopolitical neutrality, the tensions between the US and China that are currently taking place. And key deliverables, I guess, might include some progress on ASEAN centrality, enhancing infrastructural funding, deepening partnerships with external partners like the +3 countries to ASEAN, the Gulf countries, India. We also have, in what concerns Gulf countries, there's ASEAN GCC China Summit that's going to take place on 27th of May. So I guess we can expect pragmatic and multilateral tone, focused on reinforcing ASEAN's role as a hub of engagement, rather than the bloc that is seeking confrontation with external parties, and the bloc that can show an example in this new emerging multipolar order. By the way, another area of interest might be of how ASEAN handles the internal divisive issues. In particular, I refer to Myanmar and issues surrounding South China Sea, without ASEAN needing to sacrifice its unity. So I guess this, the latter one, will be the key to ASEAN maintaining its credibility.
You mentioned some really interesting points there, but before we look at some of the internal issues, we want to look beyond. And obviously, I think the major backdrop for ASEAN and for any regional organizations this year will surely be managing or balancing relations between the US and China. And you mentioned that point on geopolitical neutrality and how that's not something new for ASEAN, but I guess this time around the tensions or the stakes are obviously a lot higher. How do you think ASEAN is going to navigate that this time around?
Oh, and it's true that ASEAN must tread really carefully between this escalation between US and China. And its core strategy probably should be to press on the principle of ASEAN neutrality and avoid being pulled into any direction of any of the parties. And I think so far it mostly managed to do that. And we've seen, indeed, the US-China tensions escalating with Donald Trump in his administration's tariffs and other divisive actions. So ASEAN, in turn, has been adopting some of its own hedging strategies. And rather than choosing sides, we saw an appetite for larger engagement with external partners or blocs or other middle powers like Japan, India, European Union, and, well, of course, already mentioned Gulf states. Internally, ASEAN is going to promote the mechanisms such as East Asia Summit and Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP, to keep both US and China engaged on a multilateral basis. At the same time, ASEAN countries are investing in regional supply chains to have it more coordinated and less dependent on the external volatility. ASEAN states seem to be taking the win, the wins where they can get it out of this instability and the ongoing trade war. Which actually allows them to expand the benefits that they reap and expand the external partnerships, because on the outside there's also larger appetite to engage with the blocs like ASEAN. And after all, the world is bigger than just the US and China, even though the two great powers. And so there are European Union, Middle East, Latin America, and they all present markets and opportunity for engagement.
As you said, the world is a lot bigger than just the US and China, so I try to keep my questions short on the US, and we'll try to move on to other areas. But just this last one, if we want to quickly look at the US, an announcement from the US recently talking about trade negotiations and how they will no longer, I guess, sort of entertain one-on-one trade negotiations with countries and instead impose unilateral tariffs, you know, what they've been trying to, I guess, do from day one. With this in mind, how do you think this is going to go down in ASEAN, and how important is ASEAN unity in facing this? Or is it time for ASEAN member states to start thinking of their own national interests?
I think ASEAN is going to approach it very pragmatically. That's what we see signaled by ASEAN's chairman, Malaysia, and other states as well. I think there is a kind of resentment of being dragged into this and being accused, like ASEAN, some of the ASEAN countries have been accused of laundering Chinese goods.
Yeah.
While at the same time, you know, we know China as somebody who can adopt and rectify products and then come up with their own based on the already existing practices. So you could also think about laundering practice as something that is not completely new. And indeed, a variation of that laundering practice that we could think of was done by the US itself when goods or in manufacturing was outsourced to other countries and produced either under companies belonging to those countries or registered under those countries, or just as still American countries, but by exploitation of the cheap labor. So I think you can apply this analogy here as just goes by another name, and it was meant to remain competitive on the global market. So I think that causes large resentment among the Southeast Asian countries that are accused of such practices like laundering Chinese goods. And they are going to approach it pragmatically because eventually it boils down to them reaping benefits for themselves economically, and that's the major focus. So, if to put it simply, on the side of ASEAN, it seems that they are trying to present it as they are doing nothing bad in here. They are just pursuing their own interests, and they probably will continue to engage in this kind of risk management, especially when the United States behaves like an unpredictable partner until, you know, it changes their course of action. And here comes the ASEAN's desire to engage into multipolar partnerships.
As you said, there's been a lot more interest from ASEAN in engaging with other regions, other blocs, other middle powers. And I guess this could interpret a sort of shift away from, whatever mess is going on with the major powers. And there's also been talk about moving away from the US dollar in trade activities. And in Asia, we're seeing not just with ASEAN, but there's been initiatives like the Chiang Mai Initiative, CMIM, a currency swap arrangement that's already been sort of upgraded or agreed between some of these major countries in Asia with ASEAN. What do you make of this shift away? Is this something that, is this a strong signal, do you think?
Yes, it's been going for quite a while that ASEAN has been cautiously exploring the alternative to the US dollar in its trade activities. And it was driven by both strategic and very practical reasons. Some member states like Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand, they already have those agreements in place of trading in national currencies. Others like Vietnam and Laos are exploring the possibility of it. And this hasn't started with the recent development on the American side on the introduction of tariffs. It hasn't even started with the pressures that we've seen post-2022 with the start of Russia-Ukraine conflict and the pressures related to abiding by the Western anti-Russia sanctions. The process started much earlier, and in 2023 ASEAN summit, there was a very strong commitment by ASEAN members to pursue further the route of de-dollarization with the volatility of the US dollar. And this is a part of must be seen as a part of the wider effort to reduce exposure to the US financial policy swings and weaponization of US dollar, including the sanctions, as I just mentioned. Additionally, there was China, which has been promoting its national currency, yuan, for trade exchanges through, for example, bilateral swap lines or even digital currency pilots. But of course, we need to stay realistic and acknowledge that the full departure from the US dollar in trade exchanges is not possible right now. And of course, it's not going to happen overnight. It still will take time for the US dollar to weaken over time, and the move towards decentralized global financial system is going to happen gradually. If it
Yeah. We want to now look within ASEAN and some of the internal divisive issues, as you mentioned, the Myanmar crisis, disputes in the South China Sea, obviously still unresolved and I guess being a thorn in the flesh for a lot of ASEAN member states. Do you think we'll see any progress on these issues during the summit?
Definitely those issues are going to be raised. But as we know, there are due to differences within ASEAN itself, the economic standing, the political standing, and their position on those particular matters. It's not going to be an easy conversation. So it's Myanmar, mostly we expect the discussions on Myanmar crisis and South China Sea. So for example, on Myanmar crisis, some of the members like Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines, they pushed for stronger engagement with Myanmar and also stronger sanctions. We had an effort earlier this year by Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim to engage with Myanmar as well, although I'm not sure how much it yielded. Others still advocate for very quiet diplomacy and policy of non-interference. So this has resulted into not very consistent response on the part of ASEAN, and to the 5-point consensus actually failing, as some have concluded. Similarly, on some South China Sea, some of the member states like Vietnam and the Philippines, they push for a stronger position and more unified position on South China Sea, also because they suffer most in these encounters with China on this issue. However, the others, those that are more in the cloud of Chinese influence, like Cambodia and Laos, even though they are not claimants in the South China Sea, but nevertheless, they propose a very quiet position. So it's very hard to achieve consensus here. But anyway, ASEAN still can serve as a platform for dialogue, and some progress we have observed, like some ongoing negotiations on the code of conduct on South China Sea, even though we still see China trying to pursue this kind of divide and rule policy in the soft version, by which I mean engaging with each of the claimant states on a bilateral basis.
On that note, do you think the concept of ASEAN centrality is still relevant, or is there a need to, I guess, sort of go over this and rethink what this concept actually means, especially when talking about these divisive issues?
There is definitely some revamping that the concept would need, and we hear it from different quarters. So it's a good principle to come back to when we are talking about various crises. And indeed, ASEAN is well positioned economically, geopolitically, to play a central role in a number of conflicts, and even play a substantial role in the U.S. Mitigating the U.S.-China tensions amidst the U.S.-China trade war. And overall, the idea that the region might be the driving force behind conflict resolution, and also behind its own architecture and modernization, that's very important. So it's not a passive arena for competition of the member states and others, but it's an actor with its own agency. So I guess it requires some modernization, the concept of centrality, and definitely strengthening unity vis-a-vis external partners, if ASEAN wants to still play an important role regionally and globally.
Earlier, you mentioned some points being up on the ASEAN agenda for the summit next week. Things like these internal issues, as well as engagement with some external actors, external countries, or members, like with the other regional blocs, other middle powers and whatnot. Obviously with US and China, that's going to be on top of the agenda as well. But do you think that there's anything missing from the agenda that should be I guess, discussed or at least being considered by these member states?
I think the existing agenda provides enough material for them to discuss, including the issue of Myanmar and South China Sea, again, promising to be the most divisive ones. Also, there is this addition of to the overall ASEAN summit agenda of the second ASEAN GCC China summit, which is going to draw a lot of interest. The previous one, as we remember, did not yield much, but served as a kind of a platform for these new multipolar engagements. This is also a new development compared to the previous ASEAN summits. I don't think that Malaysia as a chairman is going to talk too much about other extra regional issues, like, for example, we've been championing the just resolution of the Palestinian issue. I don't think it should be a part of this ASEAN summit. It's more important for ASEAN states to have some sort of unity over the issues that are need our immediate attention. And also, maybe somewhere on the sidelines, it could be discussed, or what's the fallout of the Russia-Ukraine conflict and how it echoes in the region. But I do not think also it should be a part of the agenda to necessarily address. I think it's already done and settled because for the past years, ASEAN members have been issuing from adjoining the sanctions and adopting this very pragmatic, except for maybe Singapore, very pragmatic stance on this. So I don't think it requires any special official formal discussion, maybe somewhere on the sidelines it will be attended to. So I think it's pretty comprehensive, the green agenda, the digitalization, and trade in national currencies. It will help us test this year of how ASEAN can modernize itself, resolve conflicts within itself, and also how attractive it is. It will be demonstrated how attractive it is to the external partners, to other blocs.
You talked about testing ASEAN this year, and now we're coming up to almost half of 2025 with Malaysia as chair of ASEAN. How do you think the past 6 months has been under, or the past 5 months has been under Malaysia coming up to the summit now, and how do you think Malaysia will fare for the next half of the year?
There have been a number of bold moves undertaken by Malaysia, and as a chair, and in particular by Anwar Ibrahim, the Prime Minister, of the chairman of the ASEAN chairman, like trying to engage with Myanmar, which is quite significant, though, again, not sure what it yielded. On the Myanmar side, I think the sentiment is that it's not much, but signaling of this capacity to try and mediate, to persuade by soft means, it's not nothing. There was an idea circulating around for Malaysia to try become a mediating party for the recent India-Pakistan tensions. Also, maybe it didn't take off, but that idea, by its own circulating around, I think it raises a question of how much Malaysia as a chairman can be a mediating party, having this larger authority of ASEAN behind itself. There was also an issue, there was also some action on trying to negotiate with the United States on tariffs, but we've seen so far on that matter, there was not much collaboration, maybe some coordination, but not collaboration within ASEAN. And they preferred to engage, they stated they would prefer to engage on the bilateral basis with the United States, trying to reap their own benefits and negotiate on the case-by-case basis. But I think it will be raised in the summit, in fact, and they will try to coordinate it further. On the other hand, issues which are important to Malaysia, but might not be as important to the other ASEAN members, they have been kept in check. It seems so. So Malaysia has been promoting, like, again, Malaysia's stance on Palestine. Malaysia is important to it, but not everybody shares this position. And it doesn't seem it has been trying to push too hard on other members to try and adopt the same agenda. So far, so good, we can say. And with the ASEAN-China GCC summit topping up the agenda, which is a great initiative, even if we don't hear that much of an very tangible outcomes. But nevertheless, the discussions that take place are important. So far, so good. And we should see in the second half of the year what kind of outcomes we will see. Another bold move I would like to add to that, and that's the most recent one, of course, it's Anwar Ibrahim's trip, official trip to Russia, which probably upset some Western quarters, but that was a promise that he's given to the Russian president last year to come to the BRICS summit. In conjunction with this, we should add that Malaysia became a partner country for BRICS, something that it applied earlier on for, and so it moves on with this line of expansion of its multilateral partnerships.
We have just about a minute or two left, Dr. Julia, but we were talking about the other half of the year. what about the next few years to come? Is ASEAN, do you think, now at a critical juncture for them to determine or to chart its path for the next few years to come? You mentioned a lot about this need for modernization. Is that what you see as being an urgent need for the next few years to come?
Yeah, we can say that the internal bureaucracy and inertia is one of the major obstacles. So what we would like to encourage within ASEAN, I guess, it's enhancing its institutional effectiveness, overcoming this inertia, and asserting its interest in major trade and security networks, again, including digital cooperation, green energy cooperation, and also in financial sense, de-dollarization. But internally, strengthening the unity, the principle of ASEAN centrality, looking into what neutrality actually means and non-interference, and overcoming the bureaucratic inertia from within.
Plenty more we could unpack, but that's all the time that we have today. Thank you so much, Dr. Julia from Taylor's University, on Agenda Awani tonight. I guess unpacking what we can expect from the ASEAN Summit, not just next week, but I guess for the next few years to come as well. Thank you so much, Dr. Julia.
Thank you.
That's all the time that we have on Agenda Awani tonight. With me, Naila Huda. We'll catch you another time.